what is climate adaptation and resilience? When we face this question on a regular basis, I just like to make sure that we're all beginning in a fairly shared place or on this discussion. Climate change, adaptation, and mitigation are opposite sides of the same coin, which is broadly climate action. When we bring in social equity, we get to hopefully outcomes that include community resilience. So climate adaptation and mitigation plus social equity bring us community resilience. This is a model that I've taken from Movement Strategy Center and has since been used quite extensively across the adaptation and resilience field. And why are we doing this right now? And what is our purpose and our urgency? On my left, hopefully on your left too, this is what I define as the climate adaptation space. This is the space we're in right now. It's a space that is basically 2020 to 2070. We have a high level of certainty about what our climate impacts are going to be during this time. We've been able to model really successfully increases in precipitation, in heat, in severe storms. We know what's going to happen. And we also know that we are in the last phase of time where we can really meaningfully mitigate climate impacts and going into the future. And so in this period, in what I think of as a planning horizon space, we can really be choosing what is the future that we want. We can choose the future that we want, both in terms of how we are secure against the impacts of climate change that are with us, that are guaranteed to come our way. And then we can still bend the curve on where do we want to see our future generations in 2100, 2150 and beyond. This is where all good adaptation includes mitigation in order for us to take advantage of the adaptation space that we're in. Derek, do you want to go to the next slide? And this is a really exciting time to be working on climate change adaptation and resilience. It's an exciting time because the urgency is so high, but also because the partners are really diverse who are coming to the table. We have seen, of course, severe weather events ever increasing. In 2019, there were over $15 billion disasters. I'm not going to give you a headline summary of the disasters that have been with us. Obviously, we rounded the corner on the alphabet of hurricanes this year, the wildfires across the West, the experience of wildfires across the Pacific Northwest, which was surprising and horrifying for people throughout Oregon and Washington, to say nothing of the fires across California and Colorado, and in the upper Great Lakes in the Midwest, in the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes region, the experience of these historic lake levels, which has been catastrophic for infrastructure, for homeowners, and for communities who are trying to understand if these levels are going to persist, if they're going to drop. These impacts are just with us in so many forms. Along with those is a period of time that we're coming into where there has really been previous climate adaptation and resilient infrastructure work put into place, and we're starting to see the measurable result of that work, and that is leading us to be able to see much more concrete examples of the value of resilience. And in cases of resilient infrastructure where there are estimates of $1 spent on resilient infrastructure has an $11 benefit, to more conservative estimates that just came out of a congressional report that was saying $1 of investment gets you $5 of relief. Either way, we know that if we're investing in resilient infrastructure, it's going to benefit us monetarily. We also have a lot more sophisticated cost-benefit analysis tools. One of the more recent tools that came out from an organization called Headwater Economics provides a toolkit of CBAs and ways in which you can evaluate the cost benefit of a project beyond just the monetary, but thinking about environmental services, thinking about equity, thinking about social cohesion, elements of community welfare and environmental welfare that don't necessarily show up in a traditional financial ledger. And so we see both the value being demonstrable of resilience work and also our ability to quantify outside of just dollars and cents, getting to be more sophisticated as well. It's really good that we're starting to quantify things outside of dollars and cents, because the public, nonprofit, community that's really been at the forefront of this work historically is being overtaken really rapidly by work placing corporate risk accounting and an appetite by risk management, by risk disclosure entities to make sure that physical assets and physical risk to assets is being adequately disclosed. So we see risk from CDP, previously called Carbon Disclosure Project, from GRI, and most notably, from the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. And what this means is that we are seeing more corporate entities who were initially reporting risk based on what would be our financial risk if we were to take our supply and production and align it to the Paris Accord 2 degree, keeping our carbon footprint under the Paris Accord guidelines. But now what they're starting to report is what is our actual physical risk from climate change. And with corporations disclosing their physical risk publicly, we know that that's going to have an impact on what happens to the municipalities in the states where these corporations are located, because they're talking about their own physical footprint and their own physical spaces, which of course are housed within our publicly managed lands. And it's really important that we're getting alignment between the public and the private sector so we don't end up with a different set of information on risk coming from the corporate versus coming from what a municipality or other entity is trying to inform both its bond raters, but also its community members about. Just to step back, the name of the organization who's recently released the CBA is Headwaters Economics. And so this last bullet here is more kind of the same. Many people perked up their ears in January when Larry Fink of BlackRock released a statement on the necessity of climate action by corporations. I'm going to get back to a statement which he actually doubled down on that in May of this year, which a lot of people missed. But in that follow-up statement really drives home that not only is it necessary for us to be adapting our municipalities, our companies, and all of our infrastructures, but that the capital markets and the movement of capital is going to change faster than the impacts of climate will. And really a warning, a very, very clear warning that if we aren't changing our practices now, the way capital moves is going to change it for us. We also saw an amazing report released from McKinsey this year. They wrote about the physical hazard and social impacts. And if you haven't seen this report, I can't recommend it highly enough. I think it is the best report that's come out of 2020. They talk about physical risk and social risk. They talk extensively about tipping points and that the impacts from climate change are not going to be linear. We are not just going to continue on a smooth trend, but we are going to reach points in our food systems, in our infrastructure systems, that we suddenly will just not be able to sustain under the changes that are occurring. And so I highly recommend looking at this report from McKinsey.